Yo, how's it going, everybody? As always, I'm your one and only Sugi Shogun here, and today I'm gonna be finishing up my anime backlog. And today I want to talk about this show from 2018 called Sirius the Jaeger, which was produced by P.A.Works and also licensed by Netflix. So, in case you want to check it out, you can find it on Netflix. Now, this is an anime original, actually, and historically, a lot of them are not good. Sometimes they tend to have like nice character designs, but most often than not, they kind of have crappy story and kind of things that don't really make sense, because usually when you have a manga as a source material, there's a lot more detail into a lot of the things like hard magic systems and things like that. Whatever it's like Bleach, Naruto, or One Piece, they have their own mechanisms inside, and a lot of the times with anime originals, I think it's a lot more straight line and not so complex in many ways. But I have to give my hat to Jaeger, because I think this was actually pretty decent for an anime original from character, art perspective, and the story is not half bad. Perhaps be too straight lined and kind of like you can expect what will happen. There's not really like extremely amount of twists or things like that in the story, but still quite an enjoyable ride. So I probably should explain what is kind of the setting here, what type of anime are we talking about here. So Sirius the Jaeger is a vampire anime, so it's a form of a fantasy with a crossover of reality, because vampire shows don't tend to be like overtly fantasy-esque. It's usually that the vampires are coexisting with the humans, and that is, in the shadows or in the public, and that is the narrative that is being put out. And this is kind of like a similar format in that sense, that the vampires, most people don't know they exist. They believe it's all humanity and all that. And this takes place in 1930s, and it has like a forms of steampunk type of a world. It takes mostly place in Asia, places like China and Japan mostly, and I think Mongolia is even also touched upon. But it's like there is a form of technology here. It's reminiscent of steampunk in certain ways, and it follows this group known as the vampire hunter group known as Jaegers, and they are called the V Shipping Company. And they have this person along with them known as, who is a Sirius, called Yuliy, and he is basically the main character here. And his home village was basically destroyed by vampires, and he has pretty much a big of a grudge against vampires. And then there is this brother of his, which happens to be, well, kind of lost or assumed to be dead, and now he's reunited with him, and things seem to go very interesting ways. And then he happens to be like, inheritor of some type of a legacy on his village, and it's a chosen one sort of here. And then there's this sort of a Ark of Sirius, the sort of like a magical, it's not a weapon, it's a magical item of the Sirius tribe, so to speak. And that's kind of like the main setting here. Now, it's 12 episodes long, so it's not like overtly long series or anything. I think has a good pacing in it, so it's like, it doesn't have like filler content on it. The story moves in a good phase. I kind of already touched upon it earlier when I talked about the anime originals, that sometimes they lack complexity. There could have been a lot of more interesting outputs and inputs inside the aspects of the vampires, what exactly going on with them, the hierarchy behind vampires, which is very, prominent in any type of vampire IP out there. So there were a lot of these aspects which could have been better in the world and could have made it more interesting and more engaging. But overall, I think, like, in terms of the animation, it's pretty solid. The OST, kind of forgettable. The characters, kind of good. There's kind of cliche characters who are part of the Jaegers. You have Willard, who is the commander with the eyeglasses, very serious dude. You have Dorothea, who is the kind of sexy woman trope here. Then you have Philip, who is the young guy, and he's a bit of a well, he's not exactly edgy, but kind of like a stubborn kid. And then you have Fallon, who is this sort of a bulky guy, the brute force of the group. The thing is that Yuliy kind of has form of a special powers in this, and everybody else don't. So there's just like normal humans shooting with guns, and that didn't really make the Jaegers very exciting. Them having like special equipment or special abilities would have made them a lot more interesting in the show. And I just felt them they were kind of bland. Not to say that any of the vampires had exactly like very different powers from each other. I mean, they kind of had, and they are serving as kind of like the main antagonists here. But there's also political aspects, because there's not just the vampires versus the Jaegers. There's also the governments there who are trying to find the Ark of Sirius, and they think that this could be like a form of a power for them. And the world is kind of like in a peace period, but there's like, government agents, and they're trying to find things in the world, and, like trying to... There are geopolitical things, not in the most best way portrayed in here, but I don't think they were half bad or anything. Now, so overall, like, I liked the series. I think it was solid. Now, I've been a pretty critical of vampire IPs on anime. I think vampires always have worked the best in live action shows and movies, especially, whether it's the Underworld, even the Twilight movies are decent. Yes, I do actually think that. Not all the late ones, but some of them were like had some decent aspects that were good, that were interesting about the lore and the story. And you have your Buffy the Vampire Slayers and etc. But I don't really go out and say like any of the vampire stuff that I've watched in anime IPs have been particularly good. There's a certain aspect and style and how you portray because being a vampire is always portrayed from a moralic type of a perspective. Is it ethical to drink on humans, and is it ethical to survive by drinking humans and things like these? And then there's obviously the barrier between the humans and the vampires. Can they coexist? These are usually the questions and the subjects and the settings you always put out in any type of vampire IP, and they are the cliches or the building stones of a vampire story, right? And then somebody getting turned and all these things, and that is just kind of like the beauty of the vampire IP. Now, so there's also some rumors for season 2. There's a kind of like a soft ending to this thing, which can go on. Honestly, this is like, we are 3 years after. Like, it's been exactly like 3 years and like 2 months since the anime ended. And it's kind of up in the air. Will it have a second season? We had all these coronas and different things which have delayed it. But there has been rumors about a second season. Now, I don't know if that's going to ever happen. And it's kind of like hard to restart an IP again. And like, get the people interested who liked the first season. It didn't really work out with things like D. Grayman and etc. But I fundamentally just feel that there are certain ways to explore how the story could go on the second season, but I just don't see like who could be the major villains on it, and is it more like about inner conflict and things like that we would focus on. So in a way, they could have just like wrapped all the loose ends in this first season, add an episode there and there, and you would have a full story to tell here, which would have like a proper ending to it. But I mean, it has a soft ending to it already, but I think that they kind of wanted to leave it open in case they want to do more of this. But Sirius the Jaeger, it's an enjoyable ride. It's not the most complex thing ever out there, but action's good, animation's very good. So, you are looking for a 12-episode series, which doesn't take a million hours to finish, and, you have your long-running shonens, as some people prefer shorter shows, and this could definitely be there. And, I thought it was pretty good from start to finish. It could have been improved in certain aspects. Obviously, if it really was based on some source material, it could have been expanded a bit more in lore and different things about the ethos. But, yeah, that's pretty much what I gotta say about it. As always, make sure to subscribe and smash that like button. And there will be more reviews coming up and piling up on the channel in the very near future. A lot of exciting things are coming out, obviously, which I'm dying to talk about. But until then, I'll see you later.